Would you all like a tour?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I'll have someone come meet you there in just a moment, okay?
So this was invented by this guy here, Mr. Almond Stroger. Mr. Stroger was an undertaker in Kansas City who did not like the operators. According to legend, he thought that they were sending calls for his undertaking business to his competitor because one of the operators was married to the undertaker. That's the legend, at least. Fact says Mr. Stroger was a shy and cantankerous man and did not get along with people, and he blamed the operators for it. So he wanted to get rid of them, and so he rounded up some friends to help him make a machine to do that. They weren't the only people trying to do this, but they were the first people to successfully sell what they'd invented into commercial use, which is this. So this example here is from sometime around the 1950s, 1960s, and is half of what was used to serve a small town of 200 phone lines in a small unattended building. But Mr. Stroger patented the system in 1891, and it was in use with minor improvements all the way through to the early 2000s in some very remote locations. So it's made up of these modules here called selectors. Behind this gray can are a bunch of relays that control a ratchet mechanism. And that ratchet mechanism moves these contacts called wipers and moves them up, and it moves them across. So those wipers sit in front of a contact bank that looks like this. So what happens is when you dial a digit, say you dial 7, your rotary dial makes 7 pulses. This counts those pulses by moving those wipers up one level with each pulse, so you're going to go up 7. When the pulses stop, it knows the digit is done, and then hunts across that level for an available terminal. So each level goes to a different next bank of selectors, and then it's picking an available selector in that bank to then handle the next digit. And it does this over and over again, one step at a time with every digit you dial, hence step by step. So I'll give this phone here a call. First thing that will happen is one of the special selectors in the top left called the line finder is going to find my line. We'll do that again. That sends me down to the first selectors, which handle the first digit I dial, so 2. Now I'm on the seconds on top 7. 5 on the third. 4 on the fourth. 1 over here on the 5th. And now I'm on one of these connectors. These are special and handle 2 digits because each terminal is now an individual phone line. So it uses the last 2 digits of the phone number to know exactly how far up and over to go.
Yeah, this is the these
could you hang that phone up and pick it back up again for me? Oh, back there again? I'm still here.
Oh.
You can't hang up on me. This is what happens when I hang up on you. Now you have your dial tone. So if you ever watch a movie and the person off screen hangs up and you wonder why they play the dial tone sound, this is why. This type of machine was primarily used in suburban and rural areas. It does not scale well and grow well to serve big cities. But there were a couple exceptions to this, and one of them was Los Angeles had this type of equipment. So writers and directors in LA and Hollywood experienced that sometimes when they were on the phone and the other person hung up, they heard the dial tone at the end, and they put it in their movie sound effects. Meanwhile, someone living in a bigger city like New York, where there's none of this equipment, thought this was just a bunch of Hollywood magic and lies, because I've never heard the phone do that. Have you? So depending on where you lived and what machine you had, the phone network used to sound and behave a little bit different back in the day. It wasn't always exactly the same.
And these were used in 2000.
Most of this was ripped out in the 1980s,
Okay.
but a little bit of it hung on in some very small places into the very early 2000s.
Alright, at the end we have to come back and explain this again.
The news used to be distributed on these devices called teletypes.
Yeah.
These are an improvement over the telegraph key, so instead of having to tap out a message on one side and listen on the other, you can type on one side and prints on the other.
Okay.
These are used for business-to-business communications, government communications. This is what sending a cable was. Or coming down, something came off the wire.
Yeah, coming off the wire.
The wires like these wires agencies like the Associated Press. Yeah, it's printing current headlines and stuff. I think it's printing the weather right now. The weather forecast.
Yeah, rain, high, snow. I didn't realize you could go that low.
Oh, you can go lower. The
I
first one.
thought it started at like 1,200 baud or
No,
something back in the day.
The first one started at 110 baud.
Nice.
90% sure. Okay.
Your old time.
Okay.
Nice.
It's a Linux system.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yep, we're dialing into a Debian system that we've got here in the museum.
Thank you.
So it might have the 80 column card in there for the display.
This is actually running on like 132 column mode right now.
Oh,
Hang up. So.
Yeah, that sound brings back memories.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
We're just missing the "You've got mail."
Yeah, exactly. How many people nowadays remember AOL?
Lovely appliances. So these are all made by a company called Western Electric. Western Electric was AT&T's manufacturing and supply division for their Bell System monopoly. Almost everything in this room was made by Western Electric. But prior to AT&T purchasing them and having them make just telephone stuff, they were an electrical supply company that carried all range of electrical products like these lovely appliances. This toaster. Toast one side of the bread at a time, don't touch the hot metal or the live wires. Or the little Western Electric Junior for little girls to learn how to cook on. It plugs into a lamp socket because outlets didn't exist in 1915.
It's the milkshake.
Yeah, the milkshake mixer. Yep. The projector with synchronized sound. That's good.
Oh, that's actually got the.
Yeah, here's the picture.
Talking, talking motion pictures. So
They're interesting. There's just this one line scribe that says start.
yeah, it's a record.
So you don't get it quite right.
Yeah.
So keep
Which is
trying
why
to
eventually
start.
they moved on to sound on film because sound on disc was a pain in the butt.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, how do you coordinate
Yeah.
these two? Gotcha.
This toast is almost like.
That because they didn't think it was very good, which they were kind of right about for big cities. Also, well, we own the phone, so why should we pay you for your thing? Until the operators in New York City went on strike and they decided we need to give this dial thing a go. But we own a machine designed to serve New York, and so then this is what they came up with.
Oh, okay.
This particular machine was installed here in Seattle in 1923 as the introduction of dial service to the city. It was installed in a residential neighborhood because that was lower risk in case something went wrong down in Rainier Beach in Columbia City. So this was a smaller panel machine. Even still, what we have here is only about a third of it. This machine in its original state would have filled at least this entire floor on its own. The larger ones later installed in downtown would have filled this entire building, all 3 floors of it. And the buildings downtown had 2 or 3 of these machines in them. They were each meant to handle up to 10,000 phone lines. So this machine, like I said, was installed and turned on in 1923. It was turned off in 1974. Just over 50 years of continuous service. At which point they cut the connections and turned off the lights in the room and left it there because the rest of its wiring was too mixed in with another machine in the building to be easily removed, and they didn't need the space. So they just left it there until the 1980s when that other machine was also going to get scrapped and they're both going to get hauled out, and that's when the guys who founded this museum stepped in and said, we want to make a museum, we want to bring part of this machine here. And the phone company cooperated and helped them do that. They had to punch a hole in the building, cut this machine apart, crane it out, crane it up, truck it over here, and crane it up here. Wow. And we're very lucky they did because out of the hundreds of these panel machines that were in almost every U.S. major city, this is the only one that survived. This is the only one left. So when I pick up my phone to dial here, first thing that'll happen is one of these rods behind me on the line finder for move. Then as I start dialing, unlike the step, nothing else happens right away. Until I dial the third digit, now one of the rods here on the district frame will move. The next two digits will be over there on the incoming frame. And then the last two digits will be on the last aisle of the finals frame.
Wait, hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
To be honest, the phone company never liked the idea of saying hello on the phone. They always thought you should introduce who you are or where the person is called. So like, you should answer like the Johnson residence, Bill speaking, or Acme Packaging, good morning, or like, hello, this is Mr. Johnson trying to reach Mr. Smith at Acme Packaging. Like, they thought that was, you should be no nonsense about it kind of thing.
That's fair. I understand that.
Yeah.
So, he had lived in the call, and they would call, they would call you, like I call Chris, and they would say, where are you? As if they didn't know where they were talking to, they just didn't dial some number.
So it's got these bars that cross, these horizontals and verticals. You can operate them using electromagnets. So the horizontals move these fingers, and then if I operate a horizontal and then operate a vertical, it pinches contact shut at the junction to make contact between the wires crossing at that point. So it's a matrix module. And then they're strung together in a bigger multi-stage matrix, and it plots a path through this matrix dynamically to connect your call around all the other connections that are already in use. And it picks the optimal path to do it, mathematically. Yeah, all in about a second.
So you're saying the wires are through.
So there's wires going horizontally and wires going vertically,
Where there's just not right separation.
yeah, so you'll see the contact here. Yep, and then you just have to hold the vertical. That's, yeah. The contacts burnish themselves too if they operate. Keep themselves clean.
Okay.
This is the final generation of purely mechanical telephone switching.
So it went like there, here,
Yeah. So this machine has a companion on the other side called the number one crossbar, which is from the 1930s. And the number one was a direct replacement for panel. They wanted to stop building panel machines because they were a big pain in the butt. And so they built a machine that spoke the language of panel. So they turned all the physical parameters of panel into a protocol basically, but re-implemented it in crossbars. And then this machine, they kept the crossbars but reworked all the logic in it to try and make it a more flexible machine. This is the Autocron machine. It's an automatic speaking clock.
The time from your telephone company is 9:58.
So you could dial the number and get the time.
yeah.
The time from your telephone company is 9:59.
All right. I'm still not sure what is this doing.
So, just take a step back. So back in the day, your clock or watch were probably mechanical and needed adjustment or resetting, or electrical if the power went out. And how do you get the time? Well, you could wait around maybe until the radio set it, or you could ask the phone company because they got the time synced from Western Union from the U.S. Naval Observatory where they had the master clock.
Right.
Originally, so you could pick up and just ask your operator what time it was. Then as dial service came in, they set up a special operator you could reach by dialing a special number, and she would read out the time when the lamp flashed.
Wow, that was your job.
She worked. She was paid extra because it was considered a boring assignment.
Right.
Until she was replaced by machines like this here, where these drums are coated in material similar to magnetic tape, so they've got magnetic recordings on them.
Okay.
The drum on this side has the message, and the two drums over here have the tracks or the hours and minutes on them. And it changes the alignment of those every minute and hour to change the track. It will read. We use reed heads that glide on. There's a lubricant there, so it doesn't wear down the surface.
Okay.
And so it just goes back and forth reading those tracks. Like a weird tape, like a weird tape player.
But over here is the time part.
These are the time parts.
So
Yeah.
it's reading
Time from your telephone company, and then you'll see the head drop on this side. And it reads the time. The hour and minutes.
That's the voice for speaking.
Yeah.
Telephone company is
And
And
then
as soon as it hits here, that's the time coming. You'll see it.
12.
Okay, that's-
Yeah.
22. This was Autocron's demonstrator, which is why it doesn't do the and 10 seconds. Or tell you the temperature. Because the fancy ones, they had another drum where the position of the reed was controlled by a thermocouple out on the roof.
okay. So in theory, I could add a bunch of random stuff on here with different sensors and I could
Yeah.
add
There was a different machine that Autocron also made called the AIS machine, Automatic Intercept Service. So instead of just getting the buzzing for reorder, it could tell you like I'm sorry, the number you have dialed, 2750000 is not in service. And they actually recorded separate down deflection digits to get that pleasant final digit instead of just leaving a hang like And so on that machine, it was this huge drum with all these reed heads on it.
Okay.
And if you listen to one track on the drum, you just hear like or is not in service. Is not in service. It's not in service.
I gotcha.
So it could grab any recording it wanted it was either half second or second and a half.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this is the line. That's why they're placed here. And then our switches. Telephone equipment operates on negative 48 volts DC. The phone company is very nice and lets us use their DC power so we don't have to make our own. Because that's what the big motor generator is for. An AC motor coupled to a DC generator. And that big tube there, that is a mercury arc rectifier. That is a small one. Yeah, 48 volts is considered low voltage, so there are bare bus bars, but there's thousands of amps potential flowing through here. So yeah, if you drop a wrench on that, there's not a wrench anymore, and you might also not have a leg anymore. For instance, if I go over here, you'll hear the dial tone, and here's the ring back. So you hear when the phone is ringing, but it's constantly making this, so it has to make a pattern out of it because normally it's interrupted. So the way this works is the whole shaft is spinning from a motor. This magneto is making the 90 volts, 20 hertz to ring the bells in the telephone. And this tone wheel is making the various tone frequencies. So there's these two essentially gears inside that as the teeth go by these big pickup coils, it creates electrical oscillations in the magnetic field, which creates the tone frequencies. And it's constantly making those, and these are fed through these interrupters back here, which are sealed with mercury inside, so that as they rotate, the contacts to come in and out of the mercury to make and break contact arclessly. Because they had trouble with these slip rings wearing, arcing and sputtering and wearing down the brushes. This is a big beefy machine meant for big cities to be ringing hundreds of telephones day and night nonstop. And every type of machine sounded a little bit different, so we wanted this particular one working because it's the correct one for the machine behind you, the number of Crossbar, as well as that panel machine, because those were exclusively for big cities. And this was their ringing machine. And so this was the sound of dial tone in the city. Okay. This was the sound of ringing in the city. It's like different.
Very, very different.
Yeah, if you called into a small country town, it would sound different.
Okay.
There were a whole bunch of different types of machines. And also the small ones might actually stop if no one was on the phone. So if you were in a very small town, picked up the phone in the middle of the night, you might actually hear the tone spinning out.
Okay.
Yep. The oscillators, or the oscillator tubes going in. Have you guys all just come in?
We have, yeah.
Okay, let me see if we have another tour guide available for you guys.
I mean, I think it's okay. We can just wander around.
If you like,
Yeah.
Tonka trucks.
Oh, I was looking at this guy.
Oh, the Simon thing, yeah.
Yeah.
We
didn't have one, but I think his cousins.
Yeah, it's like the first electronic game. So, this is the 3 ESS, or number 3 electronic switching system. It is a computer-controlled switch. It's still analog, though. It uses tiny magnetic reed relays to make contacts in the same arrangement as the crossbars. But instead of being controlled by a bunch of relay-based logic, it's all controlled by computers. One running and one in standby. The whole box up here is the CPU. It's a mini computer with discrete logic cards inside. And then here's the memory, and down below is the power supplies. And they're fully redundant. The memory of both is kept updated in lockstep so that it can vault over if it needs to instantly. And keep its sanity. This is a smaller machine that was meant to replace step-by-step offices in small towns, but very few of these actually ended up getting built. And they also ended up getting thrown out in the 1980s because they didn't have enough memory to let you pick who your long-distance company was, and that became a requirement. And since so few of these were built, it wasn't worth designing an upgrade for them. So they just chucked it. And this was one of our more recent restoration projects because it loaded its operating system configuration and test routines all off these tape cartridges that had all gone bad. The tape stretched out and the drive belts turned to goo and snapped. So the machine crashed in 2011, couldn't be restarted. So we had to make these tape replacement interface boards that read data off of SD cards to replace the tape drives. Scan the tapes through a reel-to-reel machine to get analog wave files for the tape tracks.
Were they transplanted four-band head?
Yeah, we had to take the head out and put it on a reel-to-reel machine. Then write conversion software to convert those tracks into data files for each sector of tape, and then feed the software to feed it in so it's the tape transport moving. So this thing still thinks it has a tape drive. Nice. It used to be like dead silent. So this is outside plant. This is various types of equipment that will go outside to connect the telephone users to the telephone network. Starting with open pair wire above us, which was you ran 2 wires down the pole until it reached the telephone. Right. There's a picture of that over there. That's First Avenue, Seattle, in about 1905. You can see it was getting a bit ridiculous, which is why they moved on to telephone cables, which are individually insulated wires, in this case paper insulated inside of a lead jacket. Plastic didn't exist yet. So delicious, delicious lead. And this splice jacket would have been cast in place by using all the tools that are over there in the cabinet, including the burner to melt down the bucket of lead and the scooping and shaping forms.
The bottom one is not what you're thinking.
The bottom one is a repeater, or is a loading coil.
It's a loading coil, so you would put that on long.
They're a bandpass filter for longer runs of wire to try and filter out magnetically induced noise in the line, because even though the pairs were twisted, it's basically a giant antenna. So it's going to start picking up interference, so these would filter that out. And if you lived in a rural place and were told you couldn't have DSL back in the day, that's why. Because those would not let DSL signals through.
Interesting.
So it only let the voice band through.
Okay.
Yes.
So it didn't let the casting equipment.
It filtered out the high frequency signals used by DSL. So. So this is someone's collection that was donated. This is the only place I can demonstrate the crank phones, the magnetophones.
Oh, okay. We
So
excited now.
what's different about these is that there are batteries in the phone instead of here in the central office, instead of a battery bank to let your phones work. That'll just give you your talk power, but then there was no common power for the signaling for the switchboard lamps we saw upstairs. That's what the crank is, the magneto. It's the signaling device. So if you hook up 2 of these back to back, if you crank one, the other one will ring. And farmers used to do this because they could buy these phones from the Sears catalog and hook them up using their barbed wire fences between their farms to, 1 ring for the Joneses, 2 rings for the Smiths, something like that.
Okay.
But this one goes to the switchboard here, so when I crank it, that flap fell down called a drop to indicate to the operator that I, number 65, want to make a phone call. She would take a cord pair, answer me. I would tell her who I'm calling. She would connect me just like we did upstairs and ring it. Then when we're done talking, though, I have to ring off. I have to turn the crank again to let the operator know that I'm done, because that'll cause a different drop to fall. Maybe. Apparently I picked a bad cord pair. Use cord pair 5, note to self. There we go. That drop falls down to indicate to the operator that cord pair 6 needs her attention. She'll check, here we're done, and hang out. Or disconnect the calls. If we didn't do that, she'd have no way of knowing, and so no one else could use the cord pair even though it's sitting here doing idle.
Mm-hmm.
Until she checked and said, no, they've been talking a while. And she might ring me back and yell at me if I didn't ring off.
Okay.
Alright, so if you failed to ring off, then they would still be connected.
Yeah, they would think they would have no way of knowing we're not talking anymore. The cord pair would be tied up, preventing someone else from using it, even though it's idle.
This would change with central office batteries being more common when you would one side or the other would hang up.
Because that's when they could add those lights and buzzer, automatic buzzer upstairs on the switchboard we saw.
Okay.
So conversion from these old magneto systems to common battery or dial was sometimes slow. It usually happened when it made economic sense, but some small places could hang on quite long. The last place in the United States using a magneto switchboard was a little town up in Maine called Bryant Pond. They converted from magneto to dial in 1983. It was a very small town. The switchboard was in the front living room of the family that owned the town's phone company. And they decided to retire, so they sold it to a bigger company, and the state required that the new company upgrade the town. People in town were actually sad and ran a "Don't Yank the Crank" campaign. But progress waits for nobody in the end. Time marches on.
Do you know what the calculograph does?
Yeah, so that's for stamping the time onto the toll tickets. We actually have a demonstration of this upstairs that I skipped, but
It's really clever. it is 2 clocks in unison.
Okay.
When you push the left one, it imprints the set of the actual speed of the clock as it's rotating. When you push the right one, it pushes the delta as a result, pushes the hands of it, and you can count.
Yeah. So actually, it's the other way. So when you first put it in, you pull like that to stamp the initial time and the clock faces on. Then when you're done, you put it back in and you pull the other one. And then it goes to the box where it goes to the billing department, where an army of ladies with adding machines tallies up everyone's bill. Mobile, not cellular, but mobile service came out in the late 1940s with this antenna right here. This one, good God, covered about 20 miles. You could do 6 calls all at once and all from an operator. By the 60s, they doubled that to 12 calls, and you could dial, but you had to manually find a free channel. So it was very limited, very expensive. The big breakthrough came, like you said, in the late 70s, early 80s with AMPS, the Advanced Mobile Phone Service, which is the first cellular system where it had the grid of towers that could pass you off from tower to tower as you moved around. And that was originally these big bag phones and car phones. Yeah. Until 1984, the first handheld cell phone, the Dynatac from Motorola, for the low cost of $4,1984 just for the phone. You still had to pay for service for every month for it. And the features were you could talk on it for 30 minutes, and then the battery was dead, and you had to charge it for 12 hours. I think it was a lead acid battery.
Show phone.
Yeah, so that was for livery cars, so you could tell the driver where to take you. Because for some reason, apparently in a lot of early livery cars like that, the driver was outside and you were inside the thing. So older ones, they had like the speaking tube.
Like a stagecoach type.
Yeah, but this is supposed to be more sanitary because it's electric instead of like the speaking tube spitting on the guy's head.
Coin sorter.
Yep, for the payphones.
Got it.
To sort the money from the coin phones. It eats our dimes, so we don't demonstrate it anymore. Like, see?
What decade was this machine introduced?
Lost your dime. Decorator telephone. So in the 70s, there was more pressure to offer more choice in what your phone looked like. So AT&T opened phone center stores at your local shopping mall, where you could pop in, pay your phone bill, and pick out a lovely new phone like this stylish 1970s Sculptura here. Pay for it, take it home, plug it in using those brand new modular jacks. Never mind, those reduced after some lawsuits. But at the end of the month, though, your bill would come, and there's a rental charge on your line still. Because back in the day, you didn't buy your phone, you rented it from the phone company. And that remained true for this. There's a sticker on the bottom explaining that when you bought this, you bought the plastic. The electronics still belonged to the phone company, you had to rent them. And if you disconnected service, they could send a repairman to remove all the electrical components and put a fake dial in so you could use it as a shelf piece. This is because AT&T couldn't get permission to sell you a telephone. By the mid-70s, you could go to Radio Shack and buy a phone and plug it in. But the FCC was concerned about crossing revenue between telephone service and telephone sales, and one might be used to unfairly advantage the other. So they forbade AT&T from selling used phones until about 1980. They got permission to set up this arm's-length subsidiary called American Bell to sell telephones with a 1-year warranty at the phone center stores. And then in 1983, the year before AT&T was broken up, everyone was given the options to purchase or return the rented telephone in their house. Most did. Some people didn't, though. And so there are still grannies renting rotary phones for $5 a month to this day. There was a spin-off company called QLT Consumer Lease Services. I have some of their phones in my personal collection that I've leaked onto eBay. I have one, it's a standard 500, the rotary dial phone. The base of the phone is from the 1950s. The rotary dial is from the 1970s. The microphone is from 2005. And it was clearly scuffed up and yellowed and went to a customer after that last refurbishment before it washed up on eBay. So they've gotten their money's worth out of those parts. This one has different face plates. Or you can make your own. So out of your own fabric or wallpaper to coordinate with your house. Phone in a box. Also phones in boxes, because apparently pretending you didn't have a phone on your desk was cool in the 70s. Colonial phones, because the bicentennial was such a big deal in the 1970s.
It was.
Yeah, the Americana phone, your cane stick. Mickey Mouse and Snoopy phones, all that stuff.
They're all the same.
You can scale it down to number 5 processor.
Yeah, it's a, yep.
It's still the matrix of the cross.
Yeah, but and it's got like all the things that are really logical and stuff. I love this one, this little 715. This was designed for use in people's mansions. The advertising hilariously describes it as for the less pretentious homes. You're not wealthy enough to like have your own switchboard operator on staff, but you still want to be able to like ring up your butler to have him bring your lunch up to the study, or pull the car around to take you to town.
I guess I didn't even go to operator.
Yes, my mansion isn't that large yet. I'm still working on it.
It's not working for the last couple of weeks. I need to tell them about that. They're good this time.
Oh, do you need a copy?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the nice thing about this library is you can actually see everything moving.
This is the crossbar we were selling.
This is a different. Yeah, so this is a simplified crossbar. It's only got like two little crossbars in it.
And you have beans. And the big part about this is that like this shows what actually makes the crossbar really powerful is that you don't need a lot of.
It's got a lot of in and out, inputs and output in a very small space.
Yep. And there's the massive panel.
Look at what we call the attendant console thing.
Yes. The attending
Yeah,
console.
the secretary operator's console.
That is gigantic.
Yeah.
And it's been upgraded.
So they could have a headset on it instead of having a handset.
Yep.
High volume operation.
And then the many colors of phones we get. Phone was big. Once they kind of had to start kind of diversifying out phones, they made every color of phone under the month.
Well, once it got cheap enough to dye the plastics too.
The plastics, from what I understand, it wasn't even the cost of plastics.
There's not, well, like the 300 they had to paint, then there's more work in plastic. You know, because you do like, they were trying to get it up, let's ramp up production, so they had like 200 black dials, they had lots of parts manufactured.
Yeah. The used ones actually were easier because of the ceramic. They borrowed a facility from
Erica phone.
No, but you're pretty sweet, man. Check that out. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh my god, yeah. I remember these weird
Four-prong plugs. These weird 4-prong plugs.
Yeah, pre-modular.
What's going on with this thing?
That is the hushaphone. It is a device to keep your call private when you're shouting into the telephone. And it was the subject of a very famous lawsuit with AT&T over, can you put your own stuff onto the telephone that you rent? And eventually the answer was yes.
Oh, this whole thing like it would be an aftermarket.
Yeah, it's an
device
aftermarket
that
add-on.
AT&T
Yeah, for
did this
call privacy. And that's why like acoustic coupled modems were legal.
Okay.
I've never seen this kind of thing.
I know. I was just.
Oh yeah, that is
my
the
next question.
that is the Trommelweiler, the drum dialer from Siemens in Germany. They thought that would be a more ergonomic, friendly dial that you pull down instead of twist. It's not. It hurts your fingertip. It's easier to slip out, and it was a business phone, and the secretaries all said it chipped their nails. It was such a hideous failure that Siemens pretends they never made it. These were the standard phones. Desk or wall. Originally color was an extra option to get the choice. You know what these ridges on the top are for? Hold on, man, Nancy, I'll be right back.
Oh.
No one knew this was a thing though. No one read the brochure.
Yeah.
So everyone always just like left it dangling on the counter or on a chair, or
Yeah.
bought other things that went on the wall and covered this up to hold the
It's like, I guess that was a manufacturing, that's something that
just a stylish shape.
Yeah.
But it's
Even
actually,
on the wall version of Trimline here, same thing. It's got the fins are for.
I want one of those back now.
yeah, exactly.
Firm of Henry drives us.
That did 4 years too late. That's pretty fascinating.
One thing I regret.
Oh, I love this phone too. So this is the 5302. So this is the 500. It came out in 1949. It was standard phone until 1984. After this came out, though, no one wanted these older 302 sets from the 30s anymore, but the parts were still good in them. And there were shortages getting ramped up on manufacturing of this and other things. So in the 60s, they made this. This is one of those phones dressed up in a new plastic shell to make it look like more like a 500.
Okay.
On this one, they didn't even change the handset out. And so this had better electronics in it, so if you lived further out in town where it would improve your call quality, you might be given priority for one of these, but if you lived in town close to the central office, you might be given one of these. I've heard a lot of stories about these being installed in like schools in the 50s and around the 60s. Like a place where people wouldn't care as much.
Here's your government issued phone.
Kind of, yeah. Here's your like baseline phone.
Right.